They're used to facing off from their top posts on the Budget Committee and clearly have very different views on the biggest issues facing the nation. For the next hour, we'll try to find common ground through constructive disagreement and search for the bipartisan compromise that has been the hallmark of the U.S. Senate for more than 2 centuries. In the first segment, the senators will get 4 minutes each to make opening statements, followed by timed responses and closing statements. They'll see these clocks you see on the screen and have agreed to keep to time. No buzzers, chimes today. You won't hear any of that. For the second segment, the senators will move to these desks for a moderated discussion of the biggest domestic issues the country faces today, including dealing with the U.S. economy. Their offices agreed to that topic last week. Before we begin, just a note to the audience here, except for the beginning, if you could please remain silent, hold your applause until the end. And now, without further ado, let's get started. Please welcome Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham.
Bernie, thanks for being here.
Senators, great to see you.
Thank you.
Here this probably feels like home.
This is
awesome. Well of the Senate. We agreed to do a coin toss. Okay. Very official. To start this off, just show you the coin. This is heads. This is the Statue of Liberty. And then on the back side is tails right here. Senator Sanders, you get to call it in the air since this is home field advantage. Absolutely. For you. All right.
Heads.
It is heads. Senator Sanders, you get to choose whether you go first or Senator Graham goes first.
I'll go first.
Senator Sanders, the floor is yours.
Well, let me thank the Kennedy Institute for hosting the event, Fox News for broadcasting it, and my colleague Lindsey Graham for being here with me. I am the longest-serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. So what I'm going to tell you today is not something that you hear very often on Fox or CNN or ABC or the Washington Post, or in fact in the halls of Congress. What I'm going to tell you is that the working class and the middle class of this country are in serious trouble. We are moving toward an oligarchic form of society where a small number of billionaires not only have extraordinary wealth, they have extraordinary political power. We are living at a time when half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck in the wealthiest country on earth, when 70 million Americans have no health insurance or are underinsured, when we have a starvation minimum wage at the federal level of $7.25 an hour, where half of the elderly workers, older workers in this country, have nothing in the bank as they fear retirement. What I believe is that now is the time not to defend the establishment, which is doing phenomenally well. When you have 2 people on top in America who own more wealth than the bottom 40%, 2 people, top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%. CEOs of major corporations today are making 350 times more than their workers, and we have more income and wealth inequality than any time in American history. Now is the time for the American people to stand up, make it clear that enough is enough, and that we need a government that starts representing all of our people, not just wealthy campaign contributors. What does that mean? It means that we have to end a corrupt political system in which big money buys elections. It means that we have to end a very unfair tax system in which billionaires in a given year don't pay a nickel in federal taxes. It means we have to raise the federal minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. It means that we have to join every other major country on earth in understanding that health care is a human right, not a privilege, and stop spending twice as much per capita on health care to enrich the drug companies and the insurance companies. It means that Medicare is going to have to negotiate prescription drug prices so that we can lower the cost of prescription drugs by 50%. It means that we cannot continue to be the only major country on earth not to have paid family and medical leave. It means that we have to restore the $300 tax credit so that we are not continuing to be a nation which has one of the highest rates of childhood poverty in the United States. It means that we have to expand Medicare to cover dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses so that elderly people in this country can live out their remaining years in dignity. And it means, among other things, that we cannot continue to ignore climate change, which is an existential threat to this planet. And obviously, given the tragedies that we have faced in the last month in terms of guns, we need serious and real gun safety legislation. Bottom line, let's create a government that works for all of us, not just the people on top. Thank you.
Senator Graham.
Well, thank you very much. This is an awesome place. If you get in Boston, come see the place. I want to thank, we're here to honor Ted and Orrin. Ted Kennedy, Orrin Hatcher were great friends. They fought like tigers, but they could work together. And I have a different take on things than Bernie, and we'll get through that here in a minute. But I like Bernie. Bernie's own message, I hear this every day, all the time, and he believes it. But I just want to remind you that the Democrats are in charge. After hearing Bernie talk, you would believe we're building a wall to keep people in, not out. Things are tough, but they're going to get better, right? And socialism is not the answer to all these problems. So I just want to remind you a little bit about where we're at. The Democrats have the House, the Senate, and the White House. All these problems that were talked about, they could change or fix if they could. Their agenda is not working. So here's what I want to tell you. Vote Republican in 2022. Do yourself a favor and ask yourself the following question. Am I better off today than I was 2 years ago? And if you are in a world of hurt 2 years ago. Because most people are not better off today. And there's a reason. Policy matters. You know, we're all Americans. He loves his vision of America. I disagree with it, but I admire his passion. But here's where we stand. 8.6% inflation, the highest in 40 years. When you go to the grocery store for $100, you're lucky if you get a bag. Go fill up your car. You got to take a mortgage out to fill up your car. What's happened here? The policies that are being pursued by my Democratic colleagues are not working. The average American is in a world of hurt. 2 million people will come across the border illegally this year. The highest in the history of the country. In December 2020, we had the lowest illegal immigrant crossings in 40 years. In April of this year, it was over 250,000. This is dangerous and it's irresponsible. And you're paying almost $800 a day to pay for an illegal immigrant child in U.S. custody. It's breaking the bank, and it's just a matter of time till some terrorist comes over here and kills us all, if they could, because they don't see Bernie and I much different. We're Americans in their eyes. So we've got a broken border. We need to fix it. Crime is rampant. This defund the police effort that you've been leading and others has taken a toll. I was picked up at the airport by a couple of cops, and they patted me on the back. I thought I was in South Carolina. The bottom line is it's a tough time to be a cop now. Who wants to go into law enforcement? It's time to let the cops know you're not the problem, the criminal's the problem. So we got a lot of problems. Vote Republican and stop this madness. This is the most radical, costly agenda in modern American history. It's not working for you, and it needs to change. And they want to do more if they could. Vote Republican to stop packing the Supreme Court. We've worked hard to create a conservative majority. They want to increase the number of people on the Supreme Court to make it liberal again. They want to federalize elections, doing away with the voter IDs and instituting ballot harvesting. They want to abolish the Electoral College so New York and California will pick the president in perpetuity. Bottom line, it can be better. In 2019, we had the lowest poverty rate in modern history. African-American families before COVID were having the highest income in the history of following statistics. Women were doing better. We had a secure border. The Arabs and the Israelis were working together. We had a country that was moving in the right direction. We had low gas prices and jobs were abundant. And along come COVID. We can get back to that pre-COVID America, but you're never going to get back unless you change leadership in this country in 2022.
Senator Sanders, your response?
Just one thing, as a matter of fact, I never called for the defunding of the police.
I stand corrected.
What I do believe in is, former mayor, as a matter of fact, who worked very well with our police department, is we need community-based policing that reflects the people in those communities, that we have to fight racism in every way that we can. But I've never called for defunding the police. Now, it's interesting to hear Senator Graham speak, because other than the partisan rhetoric, what you don't hear him talking about are, in fact, the most important issues facing this country. That's what the establishment does. And Lindsey is a very good and effective representative of the establishment. Does Lindsey have a concern that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? That some 60,000 people a year die because they don't get to a doctor on time? I didn't hear much about that in that opening statement. Lindsey care that we have the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and that the pharmaceutical industry right now has 1,500 paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C., to make sure that in some cases we pay 10 times more for the medicine that we need? Did Lindsey talk about the fact that we have in South Carolina and all over this country tens of millions of workers working for starvation wages? Did he talk about a corrupt political system in which billionaires today can start a super PAC? And I guess you have some familiarity with super PACs. They help fund your campaign. Who can spend unlimited amounts of money to elect candidates. You have the absurd situation where super PACs frequently spend more money than the candidates themselves. I didn't hear Lindsey talk about the crisis of climate change or the reality that scientists are telling us. It's not Bernie Sanders, Lindsey. This is what the best scientists in the world are telling us. We don't get our act together. The planet we're going to be leaving our kids and future generations will be becoming increasingly uninhabitable. We're talking about great cities like Charleston, South Carolina. You're aware of that. Neighborhoods flooding. There are people who are thinking that not only Charleston, but Miami, New York City will be half underwater by the end of the century. You got to talk about that. You got to talk about income and wealth inequality. Do you have a concern that two people own more wealth than the bottom 42%? Do you have a concern in terms of corporate concentration of ownership? You got 3 Wall Street firms now, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, who control $20 trillion in assets. They control hundreds and hundreds of corporations throughout this country. Bottom line is we are moving toward oligarchy. And if we don't stand up and say that we need a government that represents working people and the middle class, I worry very much about the future of this country, and I hope you'll speak to some of those issues.
Well, I'll be glad to speak to my campaign. I raised $112 million. The average donation was about $40, lindseygraham.com. The bottom line is the America that we all seek to achieve, where everybody can do well, is not going to happen unless things change. You haven't called for defunding the police. Will you do me a favor and say publicly today, those who are calling for defunding the police, stop, because you're hurting the country. It's people in your party, the liberal wing, I don't know what you call these folks, but they believe the cops are the problem. You say you've never done it, but people in your party are doing it all the time. At the end of the day, I believe climate change is real, but that's no reason to destroy the fossil fuel industry in this country. We're moving to electric cars, but that's going to be 2034, 2035. Your party has made us miserable when it comes to filling up our tank. Your party took 10 million acres out of production. You closed the ability to produce oil and gas in Anwar, and you wonder why it costs so much to fill up your car. What the hell's happened in the last 2 years? Their policies. You think this is an accident? I'd like to lower health care costs, but I'm not going to take away your private coverage. Senator Sanders has a bill called Medicare for All. Bring it to the floor for a vote. I'm begging you to take Medicare for All and bring it to the floor of the Senate, which looks just like this, and let's vote. The reason it won't pass is because you're going to take private health care away from 200 million Americans, put us all under the government umbrella. It's going to cost about $40 trillion. In 2034, we'll be spending as much to maintain Medicare for All as we do for the entire federal government today. And people will have less. You get what the government gives you when they're ready to give it to you. So this idea of Medicare for All destroys private sector health care, and that is not the answer. Immigration. When are you going to fix the border? Y'all are in charge for 2 years. We've been telling you what you're doing doesn't work. I know you don't like Trump, but Trump got it right when it came to remain in Mexico. His policies secured our border. You've repealed all those policies. We're having more people come here illegally than exist in the state of Vermont. How easy would it be for some terrorist group to get into the middle of this human chaos? So I would ask you to focus on lowering gas prices, securing the border, and bringing law and order back to America. And the only way you're going to do that, Senator Sanders, is abandon the agenda that you've charted for America, because it is not working.
Well, let's talk about gas prices, because you're right. They are outrageously high. In Vermont, they're now filled up the other day, $5.05 a gallon. Meanwhile, the major oil companies made $35 billion in profit in the first quarter of this year. And at the end of the year, it is estimated they're going to give $88 billion in stock buybacks to their wealthy shareholders. So I do think we have to do something about the outrageously high price of gas. I think the president should bring the major oil companies in and tell them we're going to have a windfall profits tax on what they're doing in order to stop them from ripping off the American people. You know, the last time that oil prices were at $118 a barrel, which is what they are right now, roughly speaking, average gasoline prices at the pump were $3.83, not over $5 a gallon. So I think in the midst of what is going on in this world, and that is the war in Ukraine and Russia oil and the stopping of oil, I think what the oil companies are doing is taking advantage of that situation and raising prices to an outrageous level, which is hurting the American working family. But the issue goes beyond oil. The issue goes to healthcare. You talked about the cost of healthcare. I am sure you know that in the United States, Lindsey, we spend twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other country. While major countries like Canada, the UK, Germany manage to provide healthcare to all of their people. Why is that? Because they're not having oil companies, they're not having insurance companies ripping off the system. What we need to do right now is to take a deep breath, because this country, in fact, Lindsey Graham is right. We're in a lot of deep hurt. All over this country, Vermont, South Carolina, all over this country, people are hurting. But what we don't need right now is demagoguery. What we need is thoughtful solutions to the major crises that we face. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what we need is a government that represents all of us and not just wealthy, powerful, special interests. So that is what I am working on. What I believe, you talk about, will Medicare pass on the floor of the Senate tomorrow? No, it will not. But the real question is not whether it passes or not, it's what the American people want. And you know what the American people do want? They do want Medicare for all. You talk about the joys and beauties of private insurance. Talk to the millions of workers who lost their private insurance during COVID. So I think it is time for the working families of this country to stand up, demand a government represents all, not just the few.
So I'm calling on Senator Schumer to bring Medicare for all to the floor of the Senate sooner rather than later so we can vote on it. Because if the American people want it, and those people who vote against it should lose their job. That's the way it works. So in terms of your proposal for Medicare for all, I am challenging you and your party who run the Senate to bring it to the floor for a vote. And we'll see where the votes are. Now let's go back to gas prices. How did we go from energy independence to where we are now? Policy matters. During the campaign in 2020, President Biden and Senator Sanders campaigned against eliminating fossil fuels as we know it in America. Basically, shut it down. No fracking, shut down production. Let me tell you about oil prices. Supply, demand. It was $2.38 a gallon, price of gasoline, before COVID hit. We went into lockdown because we had to. It went to $1.77. Now, nobody was saying give the oil companies a subsidy when it was $1.77. When Biden came into office, it went back to $2.38. What's happened between then and now? The policies you pursued in terms of energy production has decreased production in the United States in a very dramatic way. You took oil leases off the table, $45 billion tax on energy production. You shut down the Keystone Pipeline. You took the $10 billion acres that Trump put into production out of production, and you're wondering what happened to gas prices. What happened to gas prices, you declared war on fossil fuels in the United States, and when you go to the pump, you're a victim of that war. Well, let's change that. Let's get back to a rational energy policy. Let's send American gas to Europe so they'll be less reliant on Russian gas. Let's cut Putin off at the knees. Let's find alternatives to Russian oil and gas. It's not the oil companies that are driving these prices. They want to produce more, they just can't. It's not Russia, it's 8% of the oil we use. It is the policies of this administration. The stated goal of this administration is to destroy fossil fuel production in America, and they're on track to do that. And folks, if you want to lower gas and oil prices, vote Republican to see if we can find a few Democrats will go back to increase production in America so that we can lower gas prices in a way that works. All I can tell you is in terms of getting sick in America, more people come to America for health care than they go anywhere else. To our doctors and nurses who've been through hell out there, God bless you.
Senator Sanders, 4 minutes for a closing statement here on this section 1.
Senator Graham talks about the need for more oil production. And that's just what the oil companies really want to do. Really? This year, they plan to provide $88 billion, not for new oil production, but for stock buybacks that go to the wealthiest people in the country, people who own their shares. As a nation, I think the time is very long overdue for us to have the courage to do something which is not easy. And that is to take on the people who contribute to Senator Graham's campaign and to Democratic campaigns. To tell the people on top who during this pandemic, this terrible pandemic, which took 1 million lives, where millions of people are suffering with long COVID, where, as Lindsey says, our doctors and nurses performed absolutely heroically. And during that period, you know what else happened? The billionaires in this country saw a $2 trillion increase in their wealth. That's the people who own the oil companies, people who own the insurance companies, people who own the drug companies, people who own the major Wall Street firms. So the challenge that we face right now is to kind of envision the society we want for our kids and our grandchildren. Do we think that as a nation, all people are entitled to health care? I do. Is that a radical idea? No. It exists 50 miles away from where I live in Canada, which spends half as much on health care but guarantees health care to all people. It exists virtually in every major country. Not a radical idea. Is it a radical idea to negotiate prescription drug prices, that Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices? Of course it's not a radical idea. Why aren't we doing it? Because the pharmaceutical industry has endless amounts of money to buy politicians, to lobby, and to make campaign contributions. Is it a radical idea to say that every kid in this country, no matter where they live, has the right to get a higher education? I don't think so. Other countries around the world already do that. You go to many European countries, do you know how much it costs to go to medical school? Virtually nothing. So I happen to believe that we should make public colleges and universities tuition-free. Let's deal with the issue of guns. And we are in a chamber today named after Ted Kennedy, whose two brothers, John and Bobby, were gunned down. And that is, the time is, again, long overdue. For the people of this country, and I think the people are prepared to do it, the question is whether the Congress is prepared to do that, to stand up to the power of the NRA and pass real gun reform legislation. Now, we've seen some progress in recent weeks. We'll see how that plays out. A modest step forward, but we have got to go further. Are we comfortable living in a nation where anybody can walk into a gun store today and come out with an AR-15, which is designed to mow down people in a military fashion? Are we designed with people able to buy high-capacity ammunition magazines? Are we satisfied with a situation where somebody can go to a gun show and not have a background check? So the time now is, for the sake of our children, for the sake of all of us, to pass serious gun safety legislation and have the courage to stand up to the NRA. The bottom line is, Lindsey talks about votes in the Senate, and he's right. Senate and the House are pretty conservative institutions. Poll after poll show they are not representing where the American people are. Our job is to create a government and elected officials who are prepared to stand up against wealthy campaign contributors and fight for ordinary Americans. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to remind you again that your government is run by Democrats. Now, that doesn't mean that we've got all the answers as Republicans, but I find this astonishing that the people in charge of your government are not going to vote on things that Bernie thinks will fix the problem. Why? Because they don't want to vote on these ideas, because they won't fix the problem. So here's the point. If you want things to change, you got to get new people in Washington to run the place. Because the answer to America's problems, Senator Sanders, is not more socialism. Your own message, what time is it? It's time to raise taxes on the rich. Your completely own message. Why do we have such a problem at the border, Senator Sanders? Is because policy matters. 2 million people will come across this country illegally. Only God knows how many we will miss. It's a complete accident waiting to happen down there. We went from having a secure border, having Mexico work with us. We changed our laws so we could have control, and it's all gone away. Folks, if you don't change who's running Washington, the worst is yet to come when it comes to illegal immigration. Gas prices. The reason gas prices are so high is because the policies they've imposed are not working for you. This is a painful transition, as described with President Biden. Their goal is to drive fossil fuels into extinction in the United States. We're talking about getting Iran to produce more gas, Venezuela to produce more gas, the Arabs to produce more gas, to lower prices here. We should be producing more oil and gas here. And when you say it's the oil company's fault, bull. They're in a business. The reason they're not producing more is because it's impossible to produce more under this administration. And if Bernie was in charge and people like him, it'd get worse, not better. All I can say is that gas prices are going through the roof, and nothing's going to change until you change Washington. Now, I don't expect to fix many of these problems with Bernie. I'll try. But there are plenty of Democrats up there who I think would have a phased-in approach to energy production. We went from being energy independent to having to mortgage your house to fill up your car. How the hell did that happen? It happened because of policy. You got a chance to fix this, American people, and I would ask you to fix it. Put Republicans in charge of the House and the Senate to stop this craziness and see if we can find a path forward from 22 to 24 to get things back to more normal. People out there, Senator Sanders, are living in hell. $600 a month due to inflation, and wages are not going up. America deserves better than this. We can do better than this. But the path charted by Senator Sanders is full-on socialism. Full-on, unequivocal socialism from cradle to grave. That's not going to fix America. We are not a socialist nation. There is a better way, and I'll promise you this. If I'm chairman of any committee, particularly the Budget Committee, if we take over, I will sit down with Democrats and Republicans to find a way to fix our national debt, which is appalling. Something like Simpson Bowles, not socialism.
Senators, thank you. That is the end of segment one. If you will, come join us at these desks. We'll make a transition to the seated, moderated section, and we'll go deeper into some of the discussions you've talked about gas prices, health care, immigration, and the like. Stand by. We'll make that transition. Senators, for the next 30 minutes, you've agreed to a broad discussion on the biggest domestic issues facing the economy, including overall all aspects of the economy, a lot that touches. So let's begin. You all talked a lot about gas prices. That is front of mind for most Americans because they see it every day. They're going up. They're on the rise, some of the highest we've seen as of yet. Senator Sanders, President Biden has said recently that this is, and Senator Graham mentioned it, part of a giant transition for the U.S. economy. Is pain at the pump part of that transition to a greener economy?
Well, let me say this, that in terms of inflation, as I'm sure you know, we're looking at an international phenomenon. Germany is the powerhouse of Europe. Their inflation rate, I believe, is 7.8%. UK, somewhat similar. We're a little bit higher than that. So what we're looking at right now, for a variety of reasons, including COVID and breaking of supply chains, having to do with China and elsewhere. And I think the greed of corporate America, you add all that stuff together, we're looking at inflation. Now, what I happen to believe, Brett, I think it is totally irresponsible for us to ignore what scientists call the existential threat to climate change. I think we've got to go forward in two ways. I think we can create millions of jobs transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And I think at the same time, I think the president has got to call those oil companies, those executives into the Oval Office and say, stop ripping off the American people. You can make some money, but you don't have to see a tripling of your profits over last year. You don't have to see $35 billion in profit in one quarter. So we are in that bind where you have to deal with climate change, or Charleston is going to be underwater. New York City will be underwater. On the other hand, we have got to protect the average American who cannot afford to pay $5 for a gallon of gas. That's the dilemma, and that's the way we've got to go forward.
Senator Graham, to Senator Sanders' point, is there some corporate greed and profiteering that factors in there? You said it was bull up there, but do you think there's any part of that, to Senator Sanders' point?
Thank you. I think it's supply and demand. I mean, when we were locked down right after COVID hit in 2020, we all went into a lockdown. Gas went to $1.77 a gallon because all of us were home. We weren't working. We were locked down to try to protect each other. The economy is coming back. It was at $2.38 when President Biden took over. What's happened in the last 2 years? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. Their campaign agenda was to destroy fossil fuel production. It's not gas companies not wanting to produce more oil and gas. It's the policies have made that almost impossible here at home. Russia, which is invading Ukraine, and one thing Bernie and I agree is that Putin sucks. So, and
I assume you concede that point?
I'm not in favor of the vulgarity, but the intent is correct.
All right. Putin's a bad guy. Yeah, there we go. I'll use the other word. The bottom line is people know when they go to the pump, it doesn't have to be this way. I don't see anything changing until you change leadership. It's not the oil companies, it's the policies that's put us out of the fossil fuel business. Some ray of hope. I believe in climate change. Pretty obvious to me that greenhouse gas effect is real. We're going to electrify the transportation fleet by the mid-2030, 2040, somewhere in that time period. Most cars on the road will be electric. Until we get there, there's no reason to drive this generation of Americans into poverty by going to the pump. You have to do two things at once. You have to deal with the economy you have today, increase oil and gas production, reverse the policies on the Keystone Pipeline, get oil from Canada. Better to get oil from Canada than it is from the Mideast. So I want more energy production here, but as we phase into electric vehicles, and we will, then we have to look at power generators, Bernie. We're going to have to, wind and solar are great, but they're not enough. The transition fuel will be gas. We should be sending American-owned natural gas to Europe. There are 2 terminals developed by Germans to receive natural gas from America. We need to unleash American natural gas production to help ourselves, but also to help our friends in Europe so they'd be less dependent on Putin. So my energy strategy is national security as much as anything else. One thing we'd agree on, if the world were less dependent on fossil fuels, who would be the biggest losers? The Iranians, the Russians, Venezuela. So let's get to that better day. Let's don't do it this way. You're doing it in a way that's destroying the American economy. The average American is going to be spending $500 more to fuel their car this year than last, and the inflation in this country is caused by bad policy choices. And it's not going to change until you get new people in charge in Washington. Vote Republican in 2022.
Senator Sanders.
If I could.
Yep.
What Lindsey is not dealing with is inflation is not just Joe Biden's issue. You have to explain why it takes place around the world, and that has to do with supply chains, the terrible war in Ukraine, and in my view, corporate greed. Lindsey says the oil companies can't. Gee whiz, they're just tied up. They just cannot produce more oil. But apparently, they got $88 billion this year to give stock buybacks. In other words, they have the money to invest in new oil production if they chose to do that. Now, Lindsey also makes the point that, we've got to move to electric vehicles, and I certainly support that. The problem is, Lindsey, we are in a moment of what's the word that I can use? I guess the scientists use it, existential, all right? We're seeing temperature rise all over the world. That means more drought, less food production. It means more flooding. It means more migration because people around the world are not going to be able to grow the food or get the water that they need, more disease. So this is not saying, well, you know, it's a good idea to move toward energy efficiency and sustainable energy. No, we have to do it right now if we love our children and our grandchildren. And the challenge that we have is, how do you do it without forcing working people to pay $5 for a gallon of gas? I think we could do it, but it's not either or.
So that's back to my original question. Do you think that the high price of gas speeds up that transition in your mind and worth the price that it costs?
No, that's not what I'm saying, Brett.
No, I know it's not, but I'm just trying to get to how you do it.
No, I think what we have got to do is, and of course, build back better. You know, Lindsey's here beating up on the president all the time. We passed, in terms of the American Rescue Plan, we passed a $1.9 trillion piece of legislation, which went a long way. You know, let's remember where we were in the midst of the pandemic. Massive unemployment. People, thousands of people dying every single day. And we passed legislation which said, we are your working family, you're hurting, we're going to get a check to you. You're unemployed, we're going to extend unemployment benefits. You're a hospital that's going broke, we're going to get money to you. You need a vaccine, but you can't get it, we're going to make it possible for you to get it. We're going to improve schools to deal with the pandemic. We passed that. The president deserves credit for that. But again, in terms of high energy prices, we have got to do a lot more here in the United States. But just to blame the president, you know, the Republicans were in power. You know, they had a great record. They had massive tax breaks to the richest people in this country. And I think Lindsey voted to throw 32 million Americans off of the health insurance that they have. Great record. Massive income and wealth inequality growth. So we have to be thoughtful about how we go forward. But beating up on the president is just not good enough.
Let's try to get to something you both agree on. You have voted similarly on trade issues before. When it comes to lifting tariffs on China, I assume you're both in the no category. Is that fair?
It depends. If it's for solar installations, I would support it. We need to get more solar paneling into this country. But I don't know Lindsey's record on this. I have, over the years, in the House and in the Senate, believed that the trade policies that Democrats and Republicans, Clinton and Bush, brought forth, which said that to American workers, yeah, we're going to pass NAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China. We're going to allow corporations to shut down by the thousands in America and then move to China or Mexico. I thought then that was a disaster. I believe now that has been a disaster.
Senator Graham?
Yeah, I'd be very reluctant. I think the tariffs imposed on China basically levels the field because they cheat. So one reason that Mexico decided to keep illegal immigrants in Mexico until their court date would come at the United States regarding asylum is that Trump threatened to put tariffs on products coming out of Mexico. And that actually worked because of what he did with China. But back to the American Rescue Plan. We worked together about $6 trillion of bipartisan spending to help with COVID. It rocked the world. A million people lost their lives, doctors and nurses. We've all gone through hell. But the American Rescue Plan, according to Larry Summers, not Lindsey Graham, was ill-conceived and ill-designed, and he said would do more to spark inflation than any policy initiative in the last several decades. This was in March last year. He was right. 9% of the $1.9 trillion went to vaccines and testing. $5 million went to this place, and I love this place. Pickleball courts. There's still $200 or $300 billion left unspent. Everything Larry Summers said about the American Rescue Plan, increasing inflation, happened. The reason we can't find baby formula is our policies here. We're down to 2 or 3 places in America that can make baby formula. The reason gas prices are high is when you took over, Senator Sanders, you took out of production 10 million acres that were in production. You shut down the Keystone Pipeline. Your policies are leading to a surge in gas prices with no end to them. So all I can suggest to the American people, this inflationary death spiral we're in is being driven by policies that don't work? And finally, have we said anything about how to control an out-of-control border? Is there a solution in the making to control the border before it's too late? This is why when you vote in 2022, I hope you'll realize that the course we're on now is very dangerous for this country in multiple ways.
Talk about it. Yes,
may
sir.
I?
Go ahead.
When we talk about voting in 2022, obviously my hope is you will not follow Senator Graham's advice. I have a lot of problems with the Democrats, but they are far superior to where the Republicans are. And let me give you an example. When we talk about major crises, I think many leading political scientists will tell you that right now we're looking, for the first time in my lifetime, and yours, at a real threat to the existence of democracy in America. And you know why? Because we have a former president, his name is Donald Trump, who goes around the country telling people, hey, I won the election. In fact, I probably won it by a landslide, but they stole it. They took it away from me. All right? Now, that happens to be what we call a big lie. And yet many of the Republicans that Senator Graham are asking you to vote for are maintaining that big lie. What does that mean? It goes beyond Trump. It goes beyond the 2020 election. It means what they are saying is the entire system, you can't trust anybody. And if you can't trust the election results, then what is the obvious alternative? We need a strong man, all right? Conservatives went to, I think it was Hungary, to meet with Mr. Orban, who runs an authoritarian-type society. So the struggle we're facing is not just that Lindsey and I disagree on this or that issue, which we do. It is the future of American democracy and whether we move to authoritarianism based on, among other things, a very big lie.
Well, quickly,
Guess
can you
what?
address that, Senator?
Trump lost the election.
Can you address that, Senator? I mean, can you say definitively the election was not stolen?
Yeah, I voted to certify the election. There was some mail-in balloting chicanery out there, but no, I voted to certify the election. President Biden's the president. And whether
Did he
Trump
win the election?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what about all of the candidates out there who are trying to say that he did? Your Republican candidates that you want people to vote for?
Well, what about the people saying defund the police? You talk to them, I'll talk to that crowd.
Well, your crowd is a lot larger than my crowd.
So here's the point. Why is he talking about Trump? Because he can't talk about anything else. He can't tell you rationally why there's no end to gas prices. It's always somebody else. It's the oil companies, it's the drug companies. These policies are not working, senators. Whether you like President Trump or not, he secured our border. We had the lowest illegal immigrant crossings in 40 years because he got Mexico and the Triangle countries to help us, not work against us. He took on China for the first time, literally in my lifetime. We were energy independent because he put in production, more acreage. He allowed us to drill responsibly in Anwar, and he approved the Keystone Pipeline. The Arabs and the Israelis were working together under his leadership, called the Abraham Accords. We replaced the USMCA, NAFTA with the USMCA. So the one thing I would say to President Trump, talk about what you did. Compare your record to what's going on now. You may actually win. To the American people, if you don't change who's running your government, things are going to get dramatically worse at the border. Gas prices are going to continue to skyrocket. Inflation is out of control. The policies these people are pushing are never going to work. That doesn't mean we've got all the answers as Republicans, but I can tell you right now, the pathway to socialism is being paved as I speak, and the worst is yet to come. Vote Republican in 2020.
All right. You know, Senator Sanders, you chuckled before when Senator Graham mentioned socialism.
Yes.
And you kind of
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Right. And so I want to let you deal with that about directly
I understand
socialism.
we could do red baiting. I guess it works among a certain part of the
Well, you're a
population.
socialist, aren't you?
I am a democratic socialist.
Okay, I'm
and
sorry.
the policies that I advocate are taking place all over the world. So I would like to ask Senator Graham, do you think raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour is socialistic? Do you think doing what every other major country on earth does, guaranteeing health care to all people, is socialistic? Do you think expanding Medicare to cover dental care is quite socialistic. Do you think in terms of Social Security, you know, you're on the Budget Committee, we just had a hearing about this. Lindsey and I disagree on this. I think we should increase benefits for Social Security recipients by lifting the cap, which is now at $147,000. So a millionaire pays the same amount as somebody making $147,000. Lift that cap, we can increase Social Security benefits by $200 a month for every beneficiary in America. Is that socialistic? Is making sure that all of our kids are able to get a higher education. Is that socialistic? Is saying that 3 Wall Street companies should not control $20 trillion in assets, we got to break them up? Is that socialistic? Is saying that CEOs should not make 350 times what their workers make? So, you know, I understand that certain words will have an impact on certain parts of our country. But take a look at the issues that we are fighting for on every one of those issues. Lindsey, guess what? American people support me, not you.
Okay, let's talk about that. How do you solve problems? We're in the Ted Kennedy Orrin Hatch world. All I can say about your Social Security plan, you want to increase benefits when the program's going broke, folks. When I was 21, my mom died. When I was 22, my dad died. I had a 13-year-old sister. We moved in with an aunt and uncle who worked in the textile plants. My world was rocked. If it hadn't been for survivor benefits coming into my family, because my sister was a minor, we'd had a hard time making it. I'm 66. I'm not married. I'm part of the problem. We need more kids out there. When in 1955, there were 9 workers paying into the system, 9 workers for every retiree. We're down to 3. 20 years, it'd be 2. Let's do something like Ted Kennedy would do. Get Republicans and Democrats to find a way, like the Gang of Six, the Simpson-Bowles plan. Senator Sanders, bring your Social Security plan to the floor. Okay. All it does is raise taxes. To get out of this mess, people like me are going to have to take a little less and pay a little more in. We're going to have to adjust the age one more time like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did. There is a bipartisan way forward. But you describe problems, but your answer is always the government. It's always socialism.
Social Security is a government program. I'm sorry about it.
Well, Senator Sanders, your Medicare for All program eliminates private sector health care. It's a $40 trillion revenue increase. It will cost more to maintain Medicare for All than the entire federal government today. There has to be some sense of responsibility here. You just can't tax people into oblivion and turn every problem over to the government.
Okay, let's respond. And I'm glad it's a good discussion. Thank you, Brett. Okay, Social Security. And again, we had, Lindsey and I on the Budget Committee, we had a hearing on it. What you forgot to tell people, Lindsey, you're right. Social Security has a solvency issue. What the actuaries say, we want 75 years of funding coming into Social Security to maintain for 75 years. What I advocated does that.
Let's vote.
Because it is let's vote on it.
Let's
fine, I'm for voting on it.
Let's
ask the American people whether they think it makes sense that somebody who makes $1 million a year or $10 million a year or $100 million a year pays the same amount into Social Security. Somebody makes $147,000.
Let's vote on it.
Let's ask them. You know what? The polling has already given us the answer. They think it is.
Why aren't we voting on it? I mean,
all right. Well, let me ask a different way, Senator Sanders.
Right?
Let me ask you.
It is fun.
Let me ask. Hold on.
Because his plan. The reason he doesn't want to vote on it, nobody's going to vote on it.
I want to vote on it.
Well, you're in charge. Let's vote.
Okay. Could I get the Senate Sergeant at Arms here? No, I'm sorry. Let me ask the question this way. The national debt, Senator Sanders, stands at more than $30 trillion. That's 133% of GDP, gross domestic product. Should Americans care about that?
Yes.
Is that a problem long term?
Yes, it is. It is, and it's something we want to deal with. Now, what Lindsey says, which is the Republican line, Social Security, Medicare for All, going to raise your taxes. You know what? It will. But you know what else it's going to do? You ain't going to have to pay a nickel in premiums, a nickel in co-payments, a nickel in deductibles. And if you are the average family out there or the average small business, or in fact, the average corporation, you are going to save money. Now, Lindsey apparently thinks that people just love paying money to the insurance companies. Average family, average person in America, Lindsey, $12,000 a year. Insurance companies making huge profits. So if I go to the American people and I say, hey, Brett, guess what? You're going to pay more. You're going to pay $5,000 more in taxes, but you're going to pay $8,000 less in premiums, deductibles, and co-payments. Now, I know he works with Fox, maybe he can't say it, but most people would say, Bernie, that's a pretty good deal. You saved me $3,000, and you're guaranteeing comprehensive health care.
Senator, I was waiting for the Fox.
All right.
Yeah, I was waiting.
I could have been worse. I could have been worse.
Okay. Let's see if we can get to something you all agree on. Is there a common ground on any issue?
Sure.
That the two of you can see eye to eye on, and what is that?
Well, I don't know if, I'm on the budget committee with Bernie, and it's been a blast. Listen, I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Now, if I get to be chairman, vote Republican 2022, we're going to have
You've said that a few times.
Yeah. So I'm going to call, remember Simpson Bowles guys, those guys? I'm going to call him in and say, okay, what would you advise us to do when it comes to saving Social Security? In 2034, if nothing changes, they can only pay 77% of the benefits because there are less people working and more people retired and they're living longer. So we all got this coming. Medicare is hanging by a thread. 2028, Part A begins to go bankrupt. There's things we can do. Here's where I think upper income Americans, like both of us, I am willing to take less from Social Security. I'm willing to have a different COLA and reshape my benefits. I'm willing to pay into more into Part A and B. I shouldn't be getting a subsidy because I'm doing pretty well. That kind of approach, Brett, entitlements are going to consume the budget. Right now, we're at 2050, we're going to have 185% of debt to GDP. Medicare and Social Security and other entitlement programs are worth saving are going to consume the debt. We're down to a small fraction of the federal pie to run the discretionary part of government. So entitlement reform is a must for us to not become Greece. So I'd like to work with Bernie to see if I can let's raise the cap, okay, 147, let's raise it. If you raise it to 190,000, you capture 90% of most wages in the country. Let's look at maybe adjusting the age one more time if we need to. Let's look at having a COLA for people 80 in the lower income brackets better than what I would get. Let's shift some of the burden from people who can afford to shift to some that can't to get through the baby boomers retiring. I'm really into finding a solution to entitlement reform. I'd like, I'm talking too much, I'll turn it over. Energy production. We can have a lower carbon economy, but you can't do it this way.
Okay, Lindsey raised some good questions. Now, I hope everybody understands. When Lindsey talks about entitlement reform, what he's talking about is cutting benefits and raising the retirement age. Talks about Simpson Bowles. I oppose Simpson Bowles because that is what they wanted to do. So here is the alternative on this one. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, where people on the top are doing phenomenally well, yes, Lindsey, they're going to have to pay more in taxes so that somebody earning the average Social Security benefit of $15,000 a year gets a break, okay? So I think you should lift the cap completely. You'll make Social Security solvent for 75 years, solve the legitimate issue you raised. And yes, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk will pay a lot more in taxes.
Well, that's
so
what? Now, I want to say on Medicare, 1 minute.
On the common ground question.
Yeah.
I didn't get it out of that answer.
Well, what you got is that he sees it as a problem. I see it as a problem. All right? Medicare. I see Medicare solvency as a problem. That is why I want us to stop spending twice as much per person on health care as any other country on earth, so that the insurance companies and drug companies don't continue to make huge profits. So I'd ask my friend, do you think it makes sense, Lindsey, that we have 70 million people uninsured and underinsured at the same time as insurance companies make huge profits and we spend twice as much as any other country on healthcare? Does that make sense to you? Is that a system that is worth defending?
I think here's the first thing I won't do. I will not take your private health care away from you unless you want it taken away yourself. His solution to your health care problem is to take away from you the health care you have today in the private sector. There are 200 million people below 65 that are insured in the private sector. I'd like to make it more efficient. I'd like to cover more people. When it comes to Medicare, we all get in the system when we're 65. He wants Medicare for all. He's going to invite hundreds of millions of people, tens of millions of people into the system that hadn't paid a dime. Medicare is hanging by a thread now. I guess the difference between Bernie and myself is that I know there is no way in hell we're going to fix Medicare with the Republicans or Social Security with the Republicans. I've got to give some. I'm willing to raise the cap. I'm willing to get people to pay more into the system. But we live in a global economy, folks. We had a 35% corporate rate. It went to 21. We're the highest in the developed world. Companies can leave America and go somewhere else. Tax policy matters. We can create tax systems in this country to drive people away. We can create tax systems in this country to incentivize job growth.
All right.
Final thought. Bipartisanship is the only way to solve these problems. Take your bills that you've put down as solutions, put them on the floor, and here's what you're going to find. No bipartisan support.
Okay, there is a bipartisan agreement currently on gun control legislation. 10 senators on the Republican side have signed on. Senator Graham, you're one of them. It's in formulation. The legislation is being written, but it deals with mental health, advocating for red flag laws, tightening background checks, licensed firearm dealers. There are some specifics in there. Senator Sanders, you're not on as of yet. Is that a common ground issue around the edges that don't deal with everything you want that you all can get to?
Right. Look, if that bill, and you're right, it hasn't been written yet. We have an outline of it. If that bill came to the floor, would I vote for it? I'm quite sure I would. Does it go anywhere near far enough? No, it does not. It is a step forward. I think clearly it does not go far enough. And as a nation, and again, as I said, I come from a rural state, most people do not use AR-15s to hunt deer. These are weapons. These are military-type weapons designed to kill people as quickly as possible, to mow people down. And as a nation, we are going to have to decide whether or not it is appropriate to do what virtually no other major country does, allow somebody to walk into a gun store and buy one of these weapons and then come out, and if they're suicidal or homicidal or whatever they may be, just mow people down. And the tragedies we've seen recently in Buffalo and Texas, I mean, unspeakable. I'm just horrible beyond words. So those are the decisions. I think this is a start, but I believe we have to go much, much further.
Senator, a closing statement here as we're coming to the end of this segment, and I was trying to find the common ground. I'm not sure we really got there, but there's promise, right, Senator?
No comment.
No comment.
So let me tell you what I think the common ground is, what we've done in the past. Senator Kennedy worked on a comprehensive immigration bill with me and others, and I wish we'd have passed it because most of these problems have gone away. He worked with President Bush on No Child Left Behind. There's a model here that works. Listen, I admire Senator Sanders. He is on message. He's got solutions. I don't think they'll work. I've never had such a hard time begging somebody to vote on their own bill. The bottom line is there are ways forward, but it's going to be a bipartisan path. That's the way it's been in the past, the way it will be in the future, and I stand ready to do that. But we need to stop this madness. What's going on in Washington needs to stop, and these people in charge need to be told no, because your family life's going to get worse unless we do. Let's talk about guns. We've made some news here today. Senator Sanders says he'd be open-minded, depending on how it's written, to the package we've negotiated. That's a big deal, because it's not what he would want, to his credit. There are things in there that you'd want that we can't put in the package for different, because other people don't want them. So the fact that Bernie's willing, Brett, maybe to vote for this is very encouraging to me. We'll see how it shakes out. And what happened here? You know, after New York, after Buffalo, and after the shooting in Texas, there's a common theme. Very disturbed people getting guns and doing terrible things with them. I own an AR-15. I served in the military, and I got an AR-15 with a seal of my reserve unit. If you ever have to defend yourself, maybe a double-barrel shotgun at your house. If everything breaks down and the mobs come, it's not enough. We're not going to ban assault weapons. We did that, tried to vote on that in 2013, got 60 no votes. But we can do some things. We can enhance background checks for 18 to 21-year-olds. We can give states who have red flag laws money to hire more psychologists, more psychiatrists, and more cops. we can do some things on the mental health front that will maybe intervene in these people's lives before it's too late. So this package, with Bernie's support, if we can write it the right way, will get 70 votes. And that's no small thing. So I want to say this as we close. Thank you, Bernie, for being willing to be open-minded to supporting this package, because if you do, I think it will give cover on the lefts from people who are upset it's not enough. John Cornyn, Mitch McConnell, maybe myself, will give some cover to people on the right when people say it's too much. So it'd be a great thing if the Senate could come together and do this pretty soon.
Final word, Senator Sanders.
If I could, and again, thank you for this discussion. The difference, the political difference, aside from all of the ideas that we disagree on between Lindsey and myself, is Lindsey keeps saying, let's go to the Senate, let's go to the House, let's have bipartisanship. I'm all for that. When I was in the House, I probably passed more legislation on the floor with Republican support than any other member. So I'm for that. But at the end of the day, there is a bigger issue, Lindsey. And the issue that we have to ask is, in fact, at this moment in history, is the United States Congress, in fact, representing the needs of the majority of the people in our country, or are they representing powerful special interests? And I think most people, frankly, whether they are conservative Republicans or progressives, will tell me that the Congress is way, way out of touch with the needs of the American people. Now, you may disagree with Medicare for all. You may disagree with expanding Social Security, lifting the cap, whatever it may be. That's not where the American people are at. So, yeah, I believe in bipartisanship. But more important, I believe we have a corrupt political system dominated by wealthy campaign contributors. I think we got to end this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. I think we've got to revitalize American democracy. We have to need Republicans to say Trump is not telling the truth. He did not win the election. That democracy, with all of its faults, is better than authoritarianism. So that's where I think Lindsey and I disagree. Thank you.
Senator Sanders, Senator Graham, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and we will see you back in Washington. It looks a lot like this on the Senate floor.
Amazing place.
Many thanks to our audience here across the country and across the globe on Fox Nation. This debate will be available on demand on Fox Nation starting right now, and will also air this Saturday on Fox News Channel, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's it from the Edward M. Kennedy Institute in Boston. I'm Bret Baier. Have a great day. I'll see you tonight on Special Report, 6 p.m. Eastern, on Fox News Channel. Thank you all.
Viewer discretion is advised.
Bad boys, what you want?